we're going to transition here to the Russian airliner. So the pilot of the Superjet 100 that crashed a year ago gave an interview. The 43-year-old captain, Yevdokimov, gave his first post-crash interview, basically giving his side of the story, which sounds somewhat reasonable, despite the fact that Russia seems to have blamed all of it on his lack of judgment and basically they kind of made him into the scapegoat of this for just poor judgment and just did everything wrong by the book. But what's your take, and what did you learn in this article, Alan?
Well, the first thing is you're getting a pilot's perspective. The aircraft has a flight data recorder. Most, I think all transport category aircraft have to have a flight data recorder. Only some have cockpit voice recorders. A cockpit voice recorder would tell you even more about how the pilots were reacting, and it doesn't sound like the cockpit voice recorder in this particular aircraft, or none of the officials have actually talked about it in any article I've read. It's been about flight data recorder. So the flight data recorder monitors a bunch of information, like what are the control surfaces doing, what are the pilot inputs, how the aircraft is responding, all these different bits of data about aircraft performance. Now the pilot said, interestingly, that once he had the lightning strike occur, the aircraft flight control computer, let's just call it that, because there's no direct physical link between the control yoke and the control surfaces. So on a small airplane, you pull back on the stick and there's actually a cable that makes the rudder go up and down, for example. In this particular airplane, it's all electronic flight controls. So you pull back on the stick, it sends a command out to an electric actuator, and the electric actuator does its thing. On top of that, there's some control laws that are put in to make the aircraft handle in certain ways based on the phase of flight you're in. And what the pilot was saying is the aircraft dumped the flight control softening or extra controls that the computer puts in and went to basically direct mode. So as you pull back on the stick, the aircraft pulls the nose up. That's what it's supposed to do. There's no buffering inside of the thing. And what the pilot was saying was when it went to direct mode, the aircraft went to direct mode, electrical systems indicated something was wrong and went to direct mode with the lightning strike, and then the pilot inputs were not happening on the control surfaces. So the pilot said there was like a 1 second delay, or he pulled back on the stick and the nose would go down. And so it got very difficult to control the aircraft. Obviously, the flight data recorders are going to tell you what happened there, because they should have that information. Now, the other part about it is, questions regarding whether the pilot should have landed the aircraft heavy or not. I think typically the answer is no, but his response is, well, I couldn't control the aircraft, so it wasn't like I was going to be able to keep in the air much longer. I needed to get on the ground, heavy or not, because we're going to hit the ground. There's no way I can keep this aircraft flying. That's essentially what he was saying.
Yeah.
That's understandable, I think, also, especially in the urgency of the situation. The fire that happened during the landing, because the aircraft bounced a couple of times, and then the landing gear, it looked like from the videos and what some of the articles are saying, the landing gear actually broke off and actually tore part of the wing tank, and the fuel comes out over the hot engine and all the hot landing gear, and then it catches fire. So kind of sparks going off, and it catches fire. Then they had that serious fire. So there's some certification things about aircraft where that's not supposed to happen. They designed the aircraft in theory that the landing gear kind of folds under, and you end up grinding the bottom of the airplane off, and the wing tanks don't get penetrated. Yeah, all that's true, but this is the aircraft was heavily loaded, it's full of fuel, so it's overweight for landing. There's a whole bunch of things going on, and it kind of gets back into that same situation we were talking about on the 737. Like, your pilot reactions to particular emergencies, you can get overwhelmed. And I'm not saying this pilot got overwhelmed, but it's possible, don't you think? You got a fully loaded airplane, you're taking off, and then boom, lightning strike, and the aircraft gets in a different mode you're not used to, and you're flying this thing in direct, quote unquote, direct mode, and it's not responding like you want to, then panic has to set in at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and like you said, 41 people lost their lives. The back half of this plane caught fire. It's a really bizarre video that they released a couple weeks ago. People kind of people from the front half of the plane, which was higher class passengers, kind of like taking their sweet time a little bit, coming out with a suitcase, like running for a little bit
with
away.
luggage.
Like, you look at this video, and the back half of this plane is engulfed in flames, and there's people running for like 30 meters, and then they sort of just like stop and walk. It's like, you need to hustle a little more there, friend. Like, it was really bizarre. I don't know.
Wasn't it odd? Like, wasn't there a person taking a cell phone? Had it pulled out their cell phone, was taking a picture?
I mean, you got to get it for the gram, It's for
what in the heck are you doing? Right. First off, there's
at least run backwards while you're taking your plane. The plane I was just on has exploded with people inside of it. Video. At least run backwards. Yeah.
I think you have two options in that situation. One, run like heck and get away from it. Smart move. The other one is help the other people who are coming out to run like heck and to get away from it, which wasn't happening. Odd. I don't know how else to describe it. It's odd.
Yeah, that's a situation for sure, where if there's someone near you as you get off who can't run as fast as you grab their arm and you help them run a little faster, and you both just sprint and you go, because that whole thing could have just exploded. It could have exploded. Like, you can't wait near that plane, and you certainly don't run and then walk. I mean, it was like, this isn't your 8th grade, 2-mile run, and it doesn't really matter if you don't finish. Like, you need to get going. It was a bizarre video. It just it just didn't add up. Like, what was in these people's mind? I mean,
right?
It's baffling. Know. But no, I agree with you. I mean, I think obviously I have no experience in this, but with all these different bells and whistles going off, that something happened that you weren't expecting, as you're just like calmly, all right, we're off the ground, like, all right, let's do this. And then suddenly you're quickly in like a fight for your life, like, this plane's not responding. I mean, that's I think you have to be understanding of like some errors anyway. Like, if a pilot makes a wrong decision there, is it really like this, malicious, like, he just didn't follow protocol? Or if it's like, hey, I tried my best to follow protocol, but things kind of got crazy, and I made an error. Like, I don't know if that's because they're trying to file criminal charges again. Yeah, and they're trying to file criminal charges against him if they haven't already.
Oh, they have, and he's got an attorney, and his attorney was in some of these articles talking about some of the evidence not being brought forward about the aircraft design. Yeah, if you're going to really get into this thing, you got to look at the pilot's reaction, but you also look at the aircraft reaction. And there was some discussion. Now, every article I've read about this incident is slightly different on the lightning side of whether they're looking at lightning affecting the aircraft systems or not. There's one article in particular which talked about doing some lightning structural evaluations of the aircraft, like something on the aircraft physically broke. That would be interesting, because that would maybe change the way the aircraft performed, clearly. And then also looking at the different systems, how do all these systems go offline simultaneously? Initially, there was like loss of comms, loss of navigation, loss of autopilot, all these, the first read on it was mostly electrical and avionics systems really shut down. That's going to make the aircraft a lot more difficult to fly. Now, flight data recorder will also tell you that, but there's power on the aircraft. We're going to learn a lot more, but just like with the 737 and Airbus accidents that have happened over time, the goal of all of this is that we learn from what happened so that we design systems in so that this doesn't occur again. That's the real output. It's just like with auto accidents, right? You made the cars much more tolerant of crazy drivers and crashes. Airplanes are no different. No different. Wouldn't you expect that to happen, Dan? That they go back and they go, "Hey, this is a list of things that happened, and we want to go take a look at these airplanes."
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, one question I have as a little bit of an outsider is, why don't they just make the landing gear more robust to take a more overweight landing?
You ever watch them do the hard landing test on landing gear? It's severe. When they do the drop test, they design those landing gear to take a lot, but at some point, the landing gear. Yeah. Well, yeah, because the landing gear is attached to the wing box, usually a spar or some sections of spar, and spars are the main load-carrying structures of a wing. So the landing gear ties into that. And what you don't want to do is what happened in this Moscow accident, which is you take the landing gear and you start to tear apart the wing structure which holds fuel. Now, some airplanes are designed such that if the landing gear were to kind of get ripped off like that, there's no fuel behind there, so the landing can get ripped off and it tears off the structure in the wing, and it all kind of goes away. There's no fuel pouring out. There is a lot of thought and structure design in it, but it's all weight, right? So the beefier you make the landing gear, the more weight you're carrying all the time. And the landing gear aren't used in flight and are just kind of dead weight for the flight, right? So you have to balance weight versus strength versus safety, which is what engineers are paid to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a suitable answer. My question has been put to bed. But yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, you talk about these overweight landings. It's like, well, just make the plane take a. But obviously, like you said, there's just a point where it's just too much and it's just becoming overkill, and you just got to understand. It's just interesting as an outsider to think that when a plane takes off, it just can't come back right away. Like it has to burn off some of that fuel. It's interesting. I mean,
well, you ever watch that?
Go ahead.
You ever watch that happen where they had an airplane, like I've seen it a number of times where an airplane's taken off, they had maybe a sick passenger or the landing gear wouldn't pull up into the wings and they got to go dump fuel. And so there are valves on big transport airplane where they just go out and dump fuel to get down to the weight where they can land it, right? Or they've gone and they burn fuel, and on the business jets they tend to go out and burn fuel. Yeah. That's why, because you don't want to overweight the landing gear and cause it to rip up the wing structure and then have a fire. That's why they do that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Of course, remember they poured that one pilot dumped fuel, and this was not funny for anyone involved, but they dumped fuel in that playground of kids in California a couple months ago. So that brought to light that practice. Yeah, that was a shame. But anyway, so yeah, it's a shame with the Russian airliner. Hopefully they can sort through that and just figure out what happened, and obviously how they can just fix the situation in the future rather than just applying blame, which seems like the main game at the moment. Like it's a terrible situation, but it doesn't seem like blaming is the biggest priority.